All right, so today we're going to start talking about chapter 21, section 5, and it's called Parliament Limits the English Monarchy. So as we talk about absolute rulers, we've learned about King Philip, Frederick the Great, we've learned about Louis XIV, the Sun King. We're also going to start to talk about where people in these different countries, starting with England, began to overthrow the kings. They resented the fact that someone was claiming absolute power over them. And so let's start with our friend King James. Now, James I of Scotland became King of England in 1603. And he was often clashing with Parliament, which was called the House of Lords. It was a semi-democratically elected group whose job it was to make laws. And so we've also seen numerous examples of where the king clashes with nobles, and this is no exception. So Parliament wanted the power over spending money in England, and Parliament wanted the power to make changes to the state church, which was the Anglican Church or the Church of England. Now, James's son, Charles I, became king in 1625. Also clashed with Parliament over the same issues. And while King James continued these clashes through the rest of his reign, his son Charles was actually forced to sign a document called the Petition of Rights in 1628. And this document limited the king's power. But he refused to obey it. He said, okay, whatever, I'm going to sign this thing. But just watch me, because I'm not going to listen. You try to limit my power, but forget about it. Now, as a result, Parliament passed a law to try to limit the king's power. And the king said, no, you don't get to tell me what to do. I'm the king. And so the result of this is the English Civil War. It went on for 7 years. And it was between the Puritans and the nobility and the lawmakers and the king. Now, in the end, Oliver Cromwell, who we also saw painting up, became the general representing Parliament, representing the Puritans here. And he actually won. They defeated the king and his armies, and the king was put on trial and executed for crimes against England in 1649. And so here's a little just graphic of England throughout the Civil War. The purple is the area controlled by the Puritans. The yellow is the area controlled by the Royalists. And you see from the beginning to the end, eventually all of England is going to fall under control of these Puritans. It's going to result in the death of Charles I by execution. And so here's Oliver Cromwell viewing the corpse of this king that he played a big part in getting executed. Now, Oliver Cromwell, upon assuming power as head of the Puritans and now as leader of England, abolished the monarchy, abolished the House of Lords. I said he oversaw the transition toward democracy, but he was by no means a democratic figure. In fact, he declared himself military dictator. He felt that he had the duty to rule England by force during this transitory period. So Parliament was sent home. He put down rebellions by force, for example, the one in Ireland, and he instituted Puritan law. That is, a very strict interpretation of Christian doctrine, and imposed this on civilian life. And so he abolished any activity that he was sinful. Now, when Cromwell died in 1658, the government actually collapsed, as is often the case when you set up a dictatorship ruling by personality. And so the next year, Parliament came back and asked the king's son to return to power. And so Charles II restored the monarchy for a period of time. However, Parliament gave him some conditions. Okay, we want you to be king. However, you must agree to habeas corpus. It's Latin for of the body. And it means that if you are going to charge someone of a crime, they have to be publicly charged. And they have to face a public trial in which they can argue and speak on their behalf. Now, Charles had a brother who was Catholic. His brother James became king in 1685. And this time, James didn't have to be executed like Charles I. But there was a bloodless revolution called the Glorious Revolution in 1688, where King James was overthrown, that is, forced to step down, and signed the Magna Carta. So the Magna Carta was signed in 1689. And so this document that King James was forced to sign limited his power. It meant that he had to obey the same laws as everyone else in England. And so the process from James through William and Mary is that these monarchs, still tracing their power by lineage, have to agree to legal limits on their power. And so, a part of this was the English Bill of Rights, which set these limits. Again, the monarchs have to obey the same rules as everyone else. And you begin to get this system, which became what we call a parliamentary democracy. So the king is becoming less and less powerful, becoming more of a ceremonial figure. Meanwhile, a cabinet of ministers develops. So who actually runs things? The executive branch in England is a prime minister. But there's still a monarchy. And so England maintained the tradition of the monarchy, and we still have a king and queen, we still have princes and royal babies, but the actual governing takes place through democratically elected officials.